do all right, then do everything that way. Um, cool. Since we're like, give me 1 second. So no, that's awesome. So I love the fact that you're doing that and you're able to combine both
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 different
different
things
things
and
and
being
being
able
able
to
to
better, all right, cool, able
able
to
to
combine
combine
some of
some.
the things that you love, like basketball,
Yeah.
with and then combine it with filming, and kind of combine those two passions.
Yeah.
What was it like when you started filming? Did you, at what point did those two start to like combine, those two passions?
Yeah, so it definitely started to combine when I was in college, and I was real into doing my teammates' highlight videos. So I started doing my own, and then I was like, okay, I want to do Rihanna's, want to do Sandra's, like I want to do my teammates' highlight videos. And I was like, okay, like when I saw the end result, and then when they posted out on our social media pages and people were loving it, I was like, this is my passion, is what I want to do. So that whole like sports combination really pushed me to like reach out to companies that focus on sports highlights, that focus on telling sports stories through videos. So that's when it really took off in college.
Yeah, and I know like the highlights.
Some coaches or people can say, "Oh, you can't really tell how good a player is through their highlights because, of course, it's their best clips." But at the same time, you can tell if a player can play just by watching some of their highlights. I think it's beneficial recruiting wise.
Oh, great. All right, so quick technical note here. Just, I know we didn't get to go over the mics,
Yeah.
but can I get you to talk kind of past the mic a little bit? We're getting a little bit of that boom 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 sound.
Okay.
So if we can just kind of talk, you don't have to be talking right into it. You can almost talk slightly sideways this way. So you're
Gotcha.
pointed out, and then like the sounds will be a little bit different.
Gotcha. Okay.
All right, cool. No, so at what point did you realize that you could actually make kind of a part of a job in terms of making content as a part of a career versus, I know you started off doing basketball. Was there a moment where you're like, oh, I really want to keep doing this
Yeah.
kind of stuff?
So when I did an internship with Gear, I learned from them. I was like, I can do this now. And so that's what I did when I got out of college. I was like, okay, I'm gonna reach out to family. I did one of my coaches' weddings. Then I did my high school. I did like a promotional video for my high school because they were doing like renovation. So me just like putting myself out there because I saw, that a company that I interned with, that's how they got started. I was like, I can do that as well. So that kind of like triggered me to just go after it.
Oh, that's cool. So was there ever any point where you kind of wondered like, all right, how's this gonna happen, or was it kind of like, so for me, I know at one point,
Mm-hmm.
I actually studied intercultural studies, development work,
Mm-hmm.
but I think it was towards my and I always loved media, but I was like, well, how am I gonna combine both of these together? And I think it really wasn't until my senior year where someone paid me to actually do something,
Yeah.
a project, and I was like, oh wow, this is, people will pay me to do this. Like, this is awesome.
Right.
Why don't I keep this up?
Yeah. No, definitely. I think I started working for a newspaper called the Sentinel newspaper for about 2 years. And that was like the complete putting together sports and video together. So they had a shooter and he would go out to the games, to the high school games, and he would shoot the games. And then they would send me the footage and I would edit it and I'll put together like a highlight video. So that was like perfect, ideal job. Like that's exactly what I wanted to do. And that just pushed me to do more though. I kind of like now I'm at a point where I don't want to settle with just sports because there's just so much. A lot of people need video editors. A lot of people need video content. So I think I'm at that point right now. But starting off, that was like my dream job, just doing highlight videos. That's a great question. So When I got back from overseas, because I was playing in Australia and I came back home, I was like, you know what? I want to start to brand myself. Like, I want to talk about my story, what I've done. And it's weird because I was talking to one of my mentors and she was like, why don't you just, interview people? Just sit down and have a conversation with them. And I was like, okay, like, because I was just going back and forth, like, how am I, you're trying to figure out how you're going to make this content, how you're going to push it out. So I just decided just to do it, like, just sit down and talk to someone that, that I knew that had, like, a similar story or that I could relate to. So the first person I messaged was my former, I say former classmate or someone I went to high school with, was Brandon Coleman. And Brandon Coleman we went to Bishop McNamara High School, and then he went to Rutgers, and he played in the NFL. So I was like, he would be a great person to sit down with and talk to. So I literally, this is how I get in contact with people. I would just message them, like DM them on Instagram, and I'd be like, hey, like, I'm doing a talk show about pro athletes or about sports. Would you mind, would you like to be interviewed? It's real informal, nothing, nothing serious. And 9 times out of 10, everybody says yes. So it got to a point where I was just hitting people up. Everybody was saying yes. And I was like, now I got to, like, like, because it takes a lot of work with the production, the setup, the editing. So I had to, like, pick, be more selective. So I had to cut it to, like, 10 professional, well-shot, edited videos. So, yeah.
Okay.
At first, I was like, it has to look perfect. It has to be well done, well produced, well shot, and the editing has to be just right. And that paid off because my show actually got aired on UDC TV station, which is the University of District Columbia. So they aired it on their show. But when COVID-19 happened, I was like, we're stuck. Like, we can't do in-person interviews, so I can't just stop because I was out and about. I was taking my camera, I was doing interviews, and I was, making the best. But when that happened, I was like, well, everybody's on Zoom. That's more. I felt like it was more personal conversation. People were more comfortable. So it just worked out, and I was able to produce way more episodes than the whole, setup production. But I think I'm kind of getting away with, having that perfect look and everything just look super, super perfect and just make content. I think it's necessary at times. Like, of course, if you're doing a short film, a documentary, or if you just want to have your podcast looking really nice and really clean cut, I think that's great. But the more content, I'm like, the more content, the better now for me.
No, because I think in some ways it is.
That when people like to see it, they're more likely to
show up more often.
Yeah.
Is almost, that's more of an issue, I think, is just showing up as much as you can, rather than trying to make the one perfect piece. That, I mean, I think you're right. It is different if you're doing kind of a show or something that's going like big, like you're doing a short film. But for regular content, like people, like perceptions have changed in terms of what people expect.
Yeah.
And so I think even as with COVID, if you looked at some of the talk shows, they're just like filmed in their basements. And, Jimmy Fallon was having his wife hold a camera and film to communicate, hey, this is serious, but also it almost brought a personality to it. And I think with a lot more like equipment being more accessible, people are a little more comfortable with just, hey, raw content that's interesting and authentic rather than have it be super high polished.
Yep, exactly. Yeah, I definitely agree. I think and that was the beauty of it. I got more interaction and more engagement, I noticed, on my social media with the Zoom interviews versus the well polished well set up production interviews. People were like, "Oh, I love it. It looks great. I love what you're doing," but more people felt comfortable like messaging or, commenting on the post. So that was cool.
No, so wait, so that's interesting. So would you just put your the Zoom conversation on on online, put it on TV, or what was that like?
Yeah, so I would first I would do an interview, and then I would spend some time chopping up like some of the best parts from the interview. So if I thought, it was funny, serious, deep, I would take the snippets and I would kind of make it look like the Gary V social media posts with the titles on the top. And then that would kind of like get their attention. Like, okay, if we're talking about, just an example, say we were talking about like chicken or something, like if it was a joke, I will put it at the top. So then that's what drew people's attention. And then Yeah, so then what I would do, I'll say, full link in my bio. So go to YouTube or, go to my website. But I was really trying to push my YouTube page.
Okay, trying to push the YouTube page then.
Yeah.
And so too with the Zooms, you did notice a difference in engagement? Was it more of engagement on social media on YouTube, or what did you like post the full the links to on YouTube, or just kind of short snippets?
Yeah, so this is real. That was more the feedback I was getting. And a lot of people went to watch the full interview, if they felt like they could relate or if it was interesting enough. And for the Zoom, I felt like it was just at that time, if that moment of our life when we were really stuck in the house, I think people were really looking forward to that human interaction. So I think it was just like people appreciated just somebody wanted to sit down and talk to them.
Okay. No, that's cool. And I think too, you're right that people just appreciate that in-person interaction, and that's what makes it work. So I'm curious, now that things are starting to reopen, what do you think is going to happen when it comes to like, will you go back to doing things in person, keep it to Zoom, do a hybrid mix? What do you think about that approach?
I think I'm gonna do a hybrid mix. I like that approach. Cause I feel like I'm always on the go. Like I always want to be doing something. So it's like if I'm not doing the full production setup, I'm like, you know what, let's just do it at home because that's another thing. I've learned that I was kind of like waiting to interview certain people to say, okay, when they're back in town or when I can go out to them. And it's like, you can just do it virtually now. I mean, we've seen that with ESPN, Saturday Night Live. Like,
it's like if ESPN can interview people virtually, then I probably can, right?
Right. And it's like you see it on the news, and I feel like I created this more news approach because that's when I started using this news like lower third because I was like, I got tired of watching COVID-19 news, to be honest, and I just felt like it was kind of like bringing people down and stuff. So I was like, I'm going to take my content and make it more positive. And it was more of a news, like every day is something new. So.
No, that's a great way of looking at it. It's like something new every day. And did you have a schedule you were trying to commit to, or?
Yeah. So eventually, I was like, I'm going to do 3 episodes per week. So
3 per week. Wow.
Yeah, I was dropping. So Monday I announced it. I was like, here are the 3 episodes. Tuesday I dropped the snippets, and I was like, watch the full video by 7 p.m. I did the same thing Wednesday, Thursday, and then I gave myself like the weekend break to interview and edit. So I was like nonstop with it.
Wow, that's pretty impressive. Have you been able to keep it up, or have you had to dial down a little bit?
To be honest, I had to dial back, and that's due to what was going on in this world. I'm gonna be honest. Well, it got to a point where I was like, okay, I have a lot of content, and I was trying to figure out how to do the back end work. So how to do like the advertisements, how to do the ads and stuff, YouTube ads, Instagram ads. I was really going to focus on that so I can push out my content to more people than just like my network, So that was my vision. And then when the whole George Floyd thing happened, and we saw that, on national TV, it really did hit me. Like it hit me to a point where I was like, I've never seen that before live. Like, you read about our history and slavery and stuff like that, and police brutality, and it goes way back deep. So when we all saw that, when the whole world saw that, I think it just hit us all at once in a very deep way, and it took me off the course. I kind of got away from it, and I kind of felt like an activist at the moment. Like, okay, what can I do to help? Because this is like ridiculous. Like, I felt like it was selfish for me to put out content if it wasn't about what was happening right now, especially with George Floyd. And then, so I've kind of gotten away from it. But I created, I always had my Thursday night talks. I had something called a generational talk, which includes like boomers, Gen X, millennials, and Gen Zs, the 4 generations. And before we were just talking about what our differences, what made us different, what made us similar, how can we learn from each other? And then when that happened, I changed the topic, and I was like, you know what? Let's talk about what's going on in the world and, how we can make a change, how we can make a difference. So every Thursday night, For the most part, I've been doing that, and that has led me to start my own. I started my own t-shirts design. I guess t-shirt clothing line, and I decided to donate to an organization called When We All Vote and Fair Vote, because that I felt like that was our solution with our conversation. So yeah, I've had this big shift because of all that going on.
Yeah, because it really was. I think in some ways it made it tough for anyone to talk about anything else during the time.
Yeah.
With George Floyd, and I think it also reached the point where people felt that like you kind of had to take a stance and address things in a certain way, because you couldn't just be silent and not talk about it. But I think a lot of people struggle a little bit with like how do you approach things, how do you deal with it. For example, how do I, as a white male, talk about some of this stuff going on, and make sure I like contribute to the conversation in a way that's like good, in a way that's helpful. What are your thoughts on perspectives? Like, what have you seen that you felt was helpful, and what have you seen that's not helpful? Because I know sometimes too, if you don't have you might have good intentions, but if you're not careful. It can backfire, and you can come across looking very insensitive.
Yeah.
Do you have any tips for people that things have done right, and then things where people can improve?
Yeah. So I have a lot of white friends. So I'm gonna be honest, it felt kind of uncomfortable because I've noticed I don't really have these conversations with my white friends, and it took like that incident. And it was like, I never really talked about this. Never talked about police brutality. How our situation is a little different if someone was to call the police on us versus if somebody was to call the police on my white friend. But I appreciated just the messages like, hey, I'm so sorry. I don't know what to do. How can I help? Let me know if there's anything I can do. I can help. Little stuff like that, it sounds little, but it was actually big. Just seeing. And that's something that I want to make it clear, because not every police is bad, and not every white person is bad. But it just at that time it made it really, really uncomfortable. But I think it was needed because I needed to have those conversations with my friends. Like, hey, yeah, this is how I feel. Like, hey, this is what I experienced. I've experienced racism before, and I never talked about those things. I just kind of like kept it under the table because for whatever reason, you want to keep your job or X, Y, and Z. And I feel like this really just brought out just the conversation, just to have it. And so I think that's important, to have the conversation and not talk about it. We don't have to have the answers. I don't think anybody has the answer right now. I think you can protest all you want. You can, wear all the Black Lives Matters t-shirts, hats, or whatever, and all that's good, but nobody really has to answer. All we can do is just have the conversation and try to understand and, come together. And I think that's been the beauty of this all. For the most part, from what I've seen, a lot of us have come together. Of course, not everybody's going to agree, and they are entitled to their opinion and their beliefs, but just going out to the protests in D.C. and stuff, just seeing like, I thought like, man, maybe I should bring a bag of food or something. I'm going to be out here all day. People were passing out waters, like food, like you were fine for the whole day. And that doesn't happen on a regular day. So just seeing that unity, we were all listening to Dr. Martin Luther King's speech and standing right in front of the White House. And it was just all different types of people. It was just beautiful. I just think us just having a conversation and if you can't talk about it, just be there. I think just be present. And if your presence is, some people may say, oh, do more than just a social media post. But I take a social media post than nothing. So whatever you feel like that makes your presence like known, that you care, I think that's important. But I also will say this, I don't think just one post is enough. I think you should, like I said, I think you should make it known that you care and do more than just the bare minimum. And I think that's just being there, just being present and having that conversation. If you have a black friend, if you have a white friend, just talk about it. That's the only way we're going to get better and grow.
It really is just a matter of having kind of regular ongoing discussions. And it's not just a matter of having one post that you put out there and, say, hey, I've checked that box, but it's more of like be intentional about, because it's going to take more than just a Facebook post to change
Yeah.
um, hundreds of years of institutional, racism and institutional, just systemic oppression in some ways.
Yeah.
But it's going to be an ongoing process.
Yeah, definitely. I definitely agree. It's an ongoing process, and with my talk, our goal was to really get people, push them to vote, register people to vote, and educate people, how to vote, how to register to vote, and know more than just the two presidents that are running. You got to know more than that. So I think that's really much key. But even after the election, we have to still, just keep keep pushing forward, because we can't just depend on, I guess you can say, the leaders in our country or the higher authority to make decisions and to make the world better. We can make it better just by how we interact and treat each other on a daily basis. So we can't stop just because of the election. We just got to keep going. So. Yeah.
No, it's true. I think people, if you look at people, assumed that, when Obama was elected, that like everything was instantly going to get better.
Yeah.
Especially when it comes to racial issues. And then it was like, no, just that didn't happen. Having one person elected doesn't necessarily solve, over centuries old problems.
Yeah.
Just with one election, it is a process.
Right. Yeah.
No, that is really helpful. And so, too, I'm curious. So it's a matter of keeping those conversations going too, and having them regularly. How do you feel, for example, for you, how has that process been as you're reaching out, talking to people in terms of having those discussions? Do you feel like how people treated you coming, as a Black woman taking into this space, and how, especially like the communication space, how are there ways that everyone, have you ever felt any discrimination, and where, even if it's subtly, and how can, in the social media space, in the media world, how can people who are white in some ways be more receptive, be more open to maybe their unconscious bias? Because I think we're getting to the spot where most people are willing to say like, oh no, I'm not racist, but sometimes there's unconscious bias that people aren't even aware of. That's the hard part. Where have you seen that, in your life, in the, especially in the media space?
Yeah.
And what are some steps people can do to intentionally identifying their unconscious bias?
Yeah.
It's kind of tricky, but how can people think through that? Is it just having discussions? Any thoughts there?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So I can give like two scenarios, one for basketball and then another for media. So for like basketball, I did a Facebook post, and it was like, it came out of nowhere. It was like all this emotion I was just feeling. I was just upset, and like I was just really into it. And I could just think about like back when I was in this game, and one of my coaches, I was overseas, and I don't think he even realized what he said. But I was just like, I think I was struggling like shooting, and I just like, my shot just wasn't going in as normal. And I remember he called me over to the side, and he was like, Tay, he was like, play like you're playing in the streets. And I just like, I couldn't like really process it, because I was like, wait, what? Like, I'm not even from the streets. Like, I'm from Bowie, Maryland. Like, like I don't understand. But in my head, like, I couldn't get it out. Like, I just had to keep playing. But it was stuff like that really hit me at that moment. Like, it's just like, I don't know, this thought of, I felt like, Black people are like from the hood, from the streets, or like, grown up in poverty. And it's like, that's not for all case for Black people. And so yeah, that's kind of like an unbiased thing. I think like just this, I don't know if it's like seeing it in movies and stuff, seeing it on TV, that's how we're like projected. But I felt like, yeah, that really was a scenario. But for the media, to be honest, I haven't really experienced any like discrimination or like any racism with media. I can only say like I did play-by-play commentating. And I know there's like this bias thing, like Black people usually are like the color commentators, and white people are usually like the play-by-play. But besides that, I really haven't been discriminated with media. I just feel like it's more of a free world type thing. Like, you can pretty much do whatever you want to do. I don't really see any I guess like any bias or racism with that. I personally haven't experienced I think we all have the opportunity to do what we want with media, whatever that is you want to do. And if people can relate and they like your content and it's real and authentic, I think people will gravitate to it. So I don't really see any, I guess like any
Okay.
yeah, anything with it.
No, well, I mean that is really helpful to hear, and I guess that is a positive note at least that on your end you feel that you have been able to have the space to be able to produce some of the stuff that you want, to have some of the conversations, and that it does feel like it is opening more. Because I mean, I think I think there's that mixture of acknowledging the progress we've made so far with the work that we need to do, and so it kind of sounds like, at least in your respect, a lot of good progress is being made, at least in that regard, in that space. And obviously we need to keep moving forward, keep producing stuff, keep breaking boundaries, keep building bridges. But it's not all bad, but there's still plenty of work that needs to be done still.
Yeah, definitely. I think just what we can do with our media platform, especially if we have a good, like a big following and stuff, you can talk about these things. That was one thing that was frustrating me. Because I was watching Gary Vee. He's I look up to him. I like his content and stuff. And I was like a little disappointed because I was like, he's posting about how to be a great marketing person and how to do this during the George Floyd thing. But then I saw he made this shift and he started talking about racism and how we can do better and stuff like that. And I just appreciate that, just using your platform to talk about these things, because it's sad, but honestly, I don't think George Floyd his family would have had justice, or I know they're still working on Breonna Taylor and etc. Ahmaud. If it wasn't for social media, right now, if it wasn't for video, I mean, that's saving the world right now. Like, it's crazy. And some people are like, oh yeah, that was wrong. Like, because we got that on video and 1,000 people reposted it, or 1 million people reposted it. Yep. So that's against the law.
No, that is a really interesting point, in that in this specific time, it is social media that is almost in some ways contributing more towards, some of the activism than any other force before. Because now all of a sudden it isn't just was it captured on camera, it was now everyone knows about it, and now people in Minnesota are getting pressured from around the world to do something that, even just 10, maybe not 10, but like 15 years, 20 years ago, when not everyone had smartphones, wouldn't have been captured and wouldn't have been posted.
Exactly. And that's frustrating because it makes you question people's like real care for the situation. Because it's like, okay, you see after the first week when I would say the brave people went out on Minnesota, out on the on the road, on the streets, and was like, this is wrong. And some people can say, why are they tearing up their own city? Like, why are they looting and all this? And a lot of that, the answer to that is really when you're suppressed or when people feel like their voice is not being heard. The human reaction to that is just to react. It's like whatever is next to you, whatever's close to you, you just, that moment, that feeling, you just take it out. And I don't think, unless you've been in that situation, if you feel like you're in a cage, it's hard to understand that. But there's no excuse. I mean, just seeing that on TV just kind of justifies why people were acting like that the first week. But after the first week, I'll say the second week, the third week, you start to see it became a trend. So here comes all the, I guess the people that have, a lot of money or celebrities, etc. And they kind of come in and they show their face. And I'm not saying that they're doing it as a trend, but you don't know if they're doing it because it's popular, or they're trying to save face, they're trying to save their job, their career, or if they really actually care. So right now, I feel like I kind of had to take a break from the news and social media, because I'm like, I don't even know anymore. Like, I don't know what is real, who really cares. Now it just seems like a I don't know, like a brand. Like, everybody's just on this Black Lives Matter brand, and yeah, it's kind of hard to tell right now.
Yeah, no. So I think it's almost like it's hard to tell. Are people actually being authentic about it, or are they just realizing that now everyone has to do something about it, or else you seem very, like just out of touch with reality. And so I guess the real test isn't going to be did someone post something, but is what are they actually doing to make a difference and to impact change.
Yeah, definitely. I definitely agree. And I think the ones that are still protesting till this day, not letting up, and peacefully, of course, those are, I give props to those people, because It takes a lot. This is a lot on the mental, a lot mentally, physically, spiritually, to put yourself out there. So that I give a lot of props to those people.
No, sounds good. Well, thanks so much, Tay, for being on the podcast. So I just want to, if people want to follow everything you're doing, where can they find you?
Yeah, so you can follow me on Instagram at taybrown31. Sorry, taybrown.31. You can also go to my YouTube page at taylorbrown31. And my website is taylorbrown31.com.
Fantastic. And I'll make sure I have those in the show notes or the description. Thanks so much for being on the podcast, and thanks so much for recording this IGTV and YouTube Live. So first for me, and thanks for doing that. And if for those listening on the podcast, you can go back and watch the video. Working out a few bugs in the audio where I think the YouTube live stream didn't have audio at first. You just got to do things live. And so I think I want to encourage you guys too, if you're wanting to produce content, just look for an opportunity, go live, work everything out, because you're gonna mess up, but the best way to get better is just by doing more stuff. So just keep creating content.
Yep, I agree.
All right. Well, thanks so much for being on the show, Tay.
No, thank you. I appreciate it. It's an honor.
All right.